The coffee cup slipped from her trembling fingers, shattering against the floor of Joe's diner. For a moment, everything stopped. The bustling breakfast crowd fell silent. The cook paused mid-order. And Lisa, exhausted from her double shift, felt her world crumbling just like that ceramic mug. It wasn't just about the cup. It was about the 3 tables waiting for their orders, the unpaid medical bills at home, and the eviction notice tucked inside her locker. It was about everything going wrong all at once. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, quickly kneeling to gather the jagged pieces. Her hands were red and raw from hours of work, her uniform stained despite her best efforts to keep it clean. She could feel tears threatening, but she fought them back. She couldn't afford to break down. Not here. Not now. In the corner booth, hidden behind the financial section of the newspaper, sat an older man in a simple gray suit. Nothing about him suggested he was any different from the other regulars who came in for the $4.99 breakfast special. He'd been coming in for 3 weeks now, always sat in the same spot, always left a modest tip. Lisa had never paid him much special attention. She treated all customers with the same warm smile and efficient service, no matter how tired she was. But today, as the diner manager's voice rose above the resumed chatter, berating Lisa for her clumsiness and the cost of broken dishware, the man in the gray suit lowered his newspaper. His piercing blue eyes took in everything, the dark circles under Lisa's eyes, the way she apologized profusely while continuing to serve other customers, the small photo of a young boy she kept tucked in her order pad that fell out as she hurriedly grabbed her notepad. "That's coming out of your check," the manager said loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "That's the second one this month." Lisa simply nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, Mr. Winters. I understand." What the manager didn't see, but the man in the gray suit did, was Lisa slipping her last $5 into the tip jar when a young college student couldn't afford to leave anything after realizing his coffee and sandwich had cost more than expected. The student had looked so embarrassed, explaining he needed to save enough for bus fare home. "Don't worry about it, honey," Lisa had told him with a genuine smile. "We all have those days." As the morning rush died down, Lisa finally had a moment to catch her breath. She approached the man in the gray suit to refill his coffee one last time before her shift ended. "Will there be anything else, sir?" she asked, the same professional courtesy in her voice that she'd maintained all morning, despite everything. The man looked up at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in years, Lisa felt truly seen. "Actually," he said in a quiet voice that somehow commanded attention, "I was wondering if you might have a moment to talk when you're finished with your shift." Lisa hesitated, her coffee pot hovering uncertainly. Strange requests from customers usually meant trouble. "It's about a business proposition," he continued, sensing her discomfort. "I've been watching how you work. How you treat people. I believe someone with your character would be valuable to my organization." "My shift ends in 20 minutes, Lisa replied cautiously. "But I need to pick up my son from my neighbor's house. I don't have much time." The man nodded understandingly. 20 minutes is all I need. And perhaps this might be a conversation worth having." He slid a business card across the table. Lisa nearly dropped the coffee pot all over again. The simple white card bore a name that even she recognized, one of the wealthiest businessmen in the country. A man whose face occasionally graced magazine covers and news programs. A billionaire sitting in her diner, drinking regular coffee, wearing an off-the-rack suit. Her hands began to tremble again, but for an entirely different reason. Something told her that whatever happened in the next 20 minutes would change everything. She just didn't know how much. Lisa Campbell had never planned on being a waitress at Joe's diner into her 30s. Life had simply happened that way, one unexpected turn after another until the temporary job became a permanent fixture of her existence. 10 years ago, she had been a promising nursing student with just a year left to complete her degree. Her professors praised her compassion and attention to detail. The future seemed laid out before her, a stable career helping others, the ability to provide for herself, maybe even travel a bit. Then came the call that changed everything. Her younger sister Diane had been in a terrible car accident. Their parents had passed years earlier, leaving the sisters with only each other. Diane survived but needed extensive care. The medical bills piled up quickly, forcing Lisa to make an impossible choice: continue her education or drop out to care for her sister and work full-time. The decision broke her heart, but it wasn't really a decision at all. Family came first. For 3 years, Lisa worked double shifts at the diner while nursing Diane back to health in their small apartment. Just as Diane began to recover and Lisa dared to dream about returning to school, another life-changing event occurred. Diane, still battling depression from the accident, reconnected with an old boyfriend and became pregnant. The boyfriend disappeared when he heard the news. "I can't do this, Lisa," Diane had sobbed one rainy night. "I just can't." "We can," Lisa had replied, holding her sister's hand. Together. Little Tommy came into the world on a snowy December morning, bringing both joy and additional responsibility. Lisa fell in love with her nephew instantly, cradling the tiny bundle and promising him a good life, whatever it took. When Tommy was barely 2, tragedy struck again. Diane's recovery had never been complete, and complications from the accident finally took her life, leaving Tommy in Lisa's care. She became mother, father, aunt, and provider all at once to the toddler who now depended on her entirely. The years passed in a blur of early mornings and late nights. The diner became her second home, her co-workers a kind of family. She learned which regular customers would overtip when they could, which ones needed a friendly ear, and which ones were just passing through town. Her manager, Mr. Winters, was a difficult man, but the job offered flexibility when Tommy got sick or had school events. Their apartment was small but clean, in a neighborhood that wasn't the best but wasn't the worst either. Lisa scrimped and saved to provide Tommy with what he needed: decent clothes, books from the thrift store, healthy food when possible. His school pictures, proudly displayed on their refrigerator, showed a boy with bright eyes and his mother's dimpled smile. The hardest part wasn't the long hours or aching feet. It was the dreams deferred. Every time Tommy asked about becoming a doctor or astronaut, Lisa encouraged him wholeheartedly while silently wondering if she'd ever be able to afford college for him. Her own nursing textbooks gathered dust on a shelf, a reminder of the path not taken. The past winter had been particularly brutal. Tommy grew 4 inches in 6 months, requiring new clothes and shoes. Then came the pneumonia that landed him in the hospital for 3 terrifying days. The medical bills arrived with shocking numbers that made Lisa's stomach clench. She took on extra shifts, cut corners wherever possible, and still fell behind on rent. Last week, the landlord had finally lost patience. The eviction notice gave them 30 days to find a new place or pay the 3 months of back rent in full, an impossible sum of almost $3,000. Lisa had tried everything: borrowing from coworkers, applying for emergency assistance, even selling her mother's old jewelry. She'd come up short, with time running out. The morning of the broken coffee cup, Lisa had woken at 4:30 a.m. as usual, gently rousing Tommy for school. They had a ritual: she would tell him a story while they ate breakfast, usually making up tales about a brave knight or clever explorer who overcame impossible odds. This morning's story had been about a magical key that opened doors to unexpected treasures. "But how did the person find the key in the first place, Mom?" Tommy had asked, his 8-year-old face serious over his bowl of cereal. "Sometimes," Lisa had answered, smoothing his hair, "the key finds the person who needs it most, right when they need it." She had no idea how prophetic those words would be. As she hung up her apron and prepared to sit down with the mysterious billionaire in the gray suit, Lisa couldn't help but wonder, could this be her family's magical key, appearing right when they needed it most? Or was it simply too good to be true? Her heart pounded as she approached his table, hope and caution waging war within her tired body. Whatever happened next would determine not just her future, but Tommy's as well. The thought gave her courage as she slid into the booth across from the man whose name was known around the world. "I'm Lisa," she said, extending her hand. "And I have exactly 20 minutes before I need to pick up my son." "Richard Thornton," the man said, shaking her hand firmly. His grip was strong but not overpowering, his eyes kind but assessing. Lisa tried to keep her hand from trembling. Everyone knew the Thornton name. The tech company he'd built from his garage had revolutionized communication worldwide. His face occasionally appeared in business magazines or news segments about philanthropy. Yet here he sat in a worn vinyl booth, his coffee mug sporting a chip on the handle like everyone else's. "I appreciate you taking the time," he continued. "I know it's valuable." Lisa nodded, unable to shake the feeling that this was some elaborate prank. "May I ask why someone like you has been coming to Joe's Diner for 3 weeks? We're not exactly known for our gourmet coffee." A small smile crossed Thornton's face. "Actually, I've been traveling incognito to diners across the city. I've visited 27 so far." "Looking for good pancakes?" Lisa couldn't help the touch of sarcasm. Lack of sleep often loosened her tongue. "Looking for exceptional people," he replied, unperturbed. "You see, I'm launching a new foundation. Not the usual charitable organization that writes checks, but something more personal. More direct." He leaned forward slightly. "Let me ask you something, Lisa. If someone handed you a significant amount of money right now, no strings attached, what would you do with it?" The question hung in the air between them. Lisa's mind instantly calculated the exact amount needed for back rent, Tommy's school supplies, maybe even catching up on the utilities. But something in Thornton's expression suggested he was looking for more than the obvious desperate needs. "I'd pay our rent first," she admitted honestly. "Make sure Tommy has a roof over his head. Then I'd put some aside for his education." She paused, considering. "But if you're asking what I'd do beyond survival, I'd go back to school. Finish my nursing degree. Has my personal number. Call me within a week with your decision about the foundation's full offer." As she reached for the envelope with trembling fingers, he added softly, "Lisa, sometimes life gives us unexpected opportunities. The question isn't whether we deserve them, it's what we do with them." Outside Joe's Diner, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. Lisa clutched the envelope inside her purse, her mind spinning with possibilities and doubts. As she walked toward her neighbor's house to pick up Tommy, each step felt different somehow, lighter, yet more purposeful. For the first time in years, tomorrow didn't just loom as another day of survival. It beckoned with possibility. The first day of nursing school felt both familiar and utterly foreign to Lisa. At 34, she was at least a decade older than most of her classmates. Her hands, though scrubbed clean, still bore the calluses from years of carrying heavy trays. As she settled into her seat, textbooks neatly arranged before her, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that someone might tap her shoulder and tell her there had been a mistake. 6 months had passed since that fateful afternoon at Joe's Diner. 6 months of whirlwind change that sometimes left her breathless. After 3 days of turning Thornton's offer over in her mind, discussing it with Tommy, in simplified terms, and even consulting her neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez who had known her for years, Lisa had made the call. "I'd like to accept your offer," she'd told Thornton, her voice steadier than she felt. "Not just for the money, but for the chance to finish what I started." What followed was a carefully orchestrated transformation of her circumstances. The Thornton Foundation, which she learned was a new venture focused on human investment rather than traditional charity, had moved with remarkable efficiency. A foundation representative named Helen became her primary contact, helping navigate each step with warm professionalism. First came the immediate relief, the back rent paid, with 6 months advanced payment to provide stability. Then a proper medical checkup for both her and Tommy, catching his developing asthma early enough for simple treatment. Their small apartment received necessary repairs that the landlord had long neglected. But the real work began with her education plan. Lisa's previous nursing credits were evaluated, and to her relief, many still applied. The foundation arranged for her enrollment in an accelerated program designed for adult learners with prior healthcare experience. A monthly stipend meant she could reduce her diner hours to weekends only, focusing primarily on her studies. For Tommy, the changes were equally significant. The foundation found him a spot in a highly regarded after-school program where he received tutoring and participated in science activities that ignited his curiosity. His room was fitted with a proper desk and bookshelf, filled with both educational materials and the adventure books he loved. Yet the transition hadn't been without challenges. Lisa's first exam had been a humbling experience, her study skills rusty, her confidence easily shaken. She'd called Helen in tears that evening. "I can't do this," she'd confessed. "Maybe I've been away from academics too long. I don't want to waste Mr. Thornton's investment." "You're not the first person to feel this way," Helen had assured her. "Remember, this is a marathon, not a sprint. The foundation believes in you, but more importantly, you need to believe in yourself." The next day, a tutor appeared, a retired nursing professor who specialized in helping returning students. With her guidance, Lisa developed new study techniques better suited to her adult learning style. Her next exam result wasn't perfect, but it was passing. The one after that was even better. There were social adjustments too. Some of her younger classmates seemed to view her with mild curiosity or even dismissal. Others, particularly those who had also returned to education after time away, became allies. A small study group formed, meeting weekly in the library, sharing notes and encouragement. Tommy had his own adjustment period. After years of having his mother's attention whenever she wasn't working, sharing her with textbooks and assignments was difficult. Lisa established special Tommy time each day, even if just 30 minutes, when her books remained closed and her phone turned off. They would read together, play games, or simply talk about his day. These moments anchored them both. The diner staff had reacted to her news with mixed emotions, genuine happiness tinged with the knowledge that she was moving toward a different life. Mr. Winters had been surprisingly supportive, adjusting her schedule without complaint. Her regular customers brought small gifts when they heard about her return to school, a coffee mug from one, a nurse-themed keychain from another. Now, sitting in that first class of her second semester, Lisa felt both the weight of responsibility and the lightness of possibility. Her phone vibrated with a text message, a photo from Mrs. Rodriguez showing Tommy proudly holding up a science project. The sight strengthened her resolve. When the professor began the lecture on patient assessment techniques, Lisa's hand was the first to rise with a question. Her voice no longer trembled with uncertainty. Later that evening, as she helped Tommy with his homework, he looked up suddenly. "Mom, are you happy now?" he asked, with the directness only children can manage. The question gave her pause. For so long, happiness had seemed like a luxury they couldn't afford, something to be postponed until their circumstances improved. But now, despite the challenges of balancing school, parenthood, and her remaining weekend shifts, Lisa realized there was a steady contentment growing within her. "Yes," she answered truthfully. "I'm happier than I've been in a long time. How about you?" Tommy considered this with the seriousness of an 8-year-old. "I like your stories better now," he decided. "They're not just about magic keys anymore. They're about real people doing real brave things." Lisa smiled, ruffling his hair. Sometimes real life has its own kind of magic. That night, after Tommy was asleep, Lisa sat at her small kitchen table reviewing her anatomy notes. A soft rain pattered against the window, creating a peaceful backdrop to her studies. Her phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. When she opened it, her breath caught. "Progress report came in today. Helen tells me you're excelling. Keep going. RT." Lisa stared at the message for a long moment. In all these months, she'd had no direct contact with Richard Thornton. The foundation operated as his proxy, handling all arrangements with efficient care. This brief message, the first acknowledgement that he was still watching her journey, sent a surge of determination through her tired body. She typed a simple reply, "Thank you for the key. I won't waste it." Setting her phone aside, Lisa returned to her studies with renewed focus. The path ahead remained challenging, but for the first time in years, it led somewhere beyond mere survival. It led toward becoming the person she had always had the potential to be. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting a warm glow across the freshly painted walls of the Hope Bridge Community Health Clinic. Lisa adjusted a framed nursing license, her name printed in bold letters, before turning to survey the reception area where patients were already beginning to arrive for the clinic's grand opening. 5 years had passed since that life-changing encounter at Joe's Diner. 5 years of determination, struggles, triumphs, and transformation that had led to this moment. "Mom. The mayor's here." Tommy, now 13 and nearly as tall as Lisa, rushed in from outside. His voice had started to change, cracking slightly with adolescence, but his enthusiasm remained that of the boy who had once believed in her bedtime stories about magical keys and brave knights. Lisa smoothed her professional white coat and took a deep breath. From nursing student to registered nurse to clinic director, the journey had been demanding but purposeful. Each step had built upon the last, supported by her own determination and the resources provided by the Thornton Foundation. The training had been rigorous. After completing her nursing degree with honors, Lisa had worked in the county hospital while pursuing specialized community health certification. Nights were spent studying, days filled with patient care, and every spare moment devoted to Tommy. There were times when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her, when doubts crept in during the quiet hours before dawn. But something had fundamentally changed in Lisa. She now believed in possibilities rather than limitations. Tommy had flourished during these years. His early interest in science blossomed into genuine academic talent. The Foundation's educational support had placed him in programs that challenged his growing mind. More importantly, he had witnessed his mother's transformation from someone barely staying afloat to a healthcare professional making a difference. The lesson wasn't lost on him. The Hope Bridge Clinic represented the culmination of Lisa's dream, a place providing quality healthcare regardless of ability to pay, situated in the very neighborhood where she and Tommy had once struggled to afford basic medical care. When she'd first proposed the concept to the Foundation, she'd expected a polite decline. Instead, they'd embraced it, helping her develop a sustainable business model that combined insurance billing, grants, and foundation support. "Ms. Campbell, everything looks wonderful," Mayor Brooks said, extending his hand as he entered. "This facility will make a real difference in the community." "That's the intention," Lisa replied with quiet confidence. "Everyone deserves quality healthcare with dignity." As the opening ceremony commenced, Lisa scanned the gathering crowd. Local residents, medical colleagues, community leaders, all were present to support the clinic's mission. Her former diner manager Mr. Winters stood in the back, awkwardly holding a bouquet of flowers. Several regular customers from Joe's had come as well, beaming with pride for the waitress who had remembered their orders and listened to their stories over countless cups of coffee. Helen from the Foundation sat in the front row, her professional demeanor softened by genuine affection. Over the years, she had become more than just Lisa's Foundation contact. She was a mentor and friend who had guided her through each phase of her journey. But one face was missing from the crowd, Richard Thornton. Lisa hadn't expected him to attend. Their communication over the years had been minimal. Occasional brief messages marking significant milestones, a handwritten note when she graduated, but never another face-to-face meeting. His involvement remained at a distance, allowing her to build her new life without feeling indebted to his presence. After the ribbon cutting and the applause, after the tours of the new examination rooms and community education space, the crowd began to disperse. Lisa remained behind, savoring a quiet moment in the clinic that had once been just a dream sketched on notebook paper at her kitchen table. "It's everything you described that day at the diner," came a familiar voice. Lisa turned to find Richard Thornton standing in the doorway, older now, his hair grayer, but with the same observant eyes that had seen her potential years ago. "Mr. Thornton," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "I didn't know you were coming." "I wanted to see the completion of the circle," he replied, stepping into the room. 5 years ago, you told me what you'd do if given the chance. You've done exactly that, and more." Lisa gestured around the clinic. "None of this would exist without your foundation. I've thanked you 1,000 times in my mind." Thornton shook his head slightly. "The foundation provided resources, but you provided the character, the vision, and the work. We invested in you because we saw what you could become, but you're the one who became it. Tommy appeared in the doorway, his eyes widening with recognition. You're him, aren't you? The one Mom told me about. The one who was watching. Tommy, Lisa began, but Thornton smiled. Yes, I was watching. But now, others are watching your mother. She's become someone worth emulating. Lisa felt a flush of emotion. We've tried to pay it forward, like you asked. The clinic has a mentorship program for single parents interested in healthcare careers. 2 participants are already in nursing school. Thornton nodded with approval. That's how positive change sustains itself, through a chain of opportunity and responsibility. He looked around the clinic once more. I've visited 63 diners since yours, Lisa. Made similar offers to 27 people. Not all succeeded as you have. What was different? She asked, genuinely curious. Some people see opportunity as an ending, a problem solved. You saw it as a beginning, a problem to solve for others. He extended his hand. Congratulations, Ms. Campbell. Or should I say, Director Campbell. As they shook hands, Lisa felt the completion of a journey that had begun with a broken coffee cup and a seemingly impossible proposition. But she also felt the beginning of something larger, a cycle of opportunity that would continue beyond her own story. Later that evening, after the excitement had faded and Tommy was engrossed in homework, Lisa sat on their apartment balcony looking out at the neighborhood she'd chosen to stay in and serve. Her phone buzzed with messages of congratulations, but one in particular caught her attention, a text from a young waitress at Joe's Diner who had recently confided her dream of becoming a physical therapist. Your speech today made me believe it might be possible, the message read. Do you really think someone like me could do it? Lisa smiled and began to type, I know you can. Let's meet for coffee next week and talk about first steps. She paused, looking up at the starlit sky. The journey from where she had been to where she now stood seemed both miraculous and methodical, a series of choices, efforts, and opportunities seized. The magical key hadn't been Richard Thornton's money, though that had opened the first door. The real key had been the recognition of her own worth and potential, which had been there all along, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. As Lisa finished her encouraging message to the young waitress, she understood the most important lesson of her journey. Sometimes the most profound change begins with simply being seen, really seen, for who you are and who you could become. And then, when you've finally reached the place you've worked so hard to arrive at, the greatest fulfillment comes from turning around and helping someone else find their way forward too. That, she realized, was the true magic, not just changing your own story, but becoming part of the story that changes others.